Hey there, it's Nicole Safely with I Am Fierce, and this is the Art of Confidence event, how to build unstoppable confidence and skyrocket your revenue. You guys, I am super excited to bring to you our speaker this evening, Dr. Shahana Alibhai, and she is going to really challenge you a little bit thinking about our emotional intelligence and emotional literacy. Dr. Shahana Alibhai is a professional speaker. She's a family physician and a mental health expert. She's been working with a multitude of national organizations, including the University of British Columbia, Scotiabank, and Remax, to help the audiences gain more clarity into their mental health. As a lead physician at one of British Columbia's largest youth health centers, Dr. Shahana's career is focused on those struggling with their mental health. And wasn't Mental Health Awareness just last month, I think, right? Every day should be about mental health awareness, learning so much more about myself and the others, others around me, and just where this really impacts. But her insights are highly sought after. She's been featured in multiple major media, including CTV and Global. She's known for her emotional literacy for Better Mental Health TEDx talk and as a panelist at the International Women's Day. That's amazing. She's served on the UBC Family of Medicine Residency Training Program, and she's currently a nationally accredited for the College of Canadian Family Physicians. Dr. Shahana is passionate about shaping policy around child and youth mental health by bridging the gap between healthcare and social emotional education. Dr. Shahana is a master at blending her personal story of postpartum anxiety and the resulting shame, denial, and mental health challenges with her professional background in cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness meditation. I love how well-rounded this all is, Dr. Shahana. Her candor, humor, and refreshing honesty are going to shine through, really shine a light on this topic that's really too often stigmatized, and help to inspire just an authentic dialogue to keep the conversation moving forward. I think that's so important as we dive into, what is it about confidence? Everybody tells us, female entrepreneurs, oh, you just need to build your confidence, get out there and go get it. Like, okay. That's not so easy. So I'd love for you, Dr. Shahana, just kind of jump in, tell us a little bit about your story, and then I have a lot of questions I want to dive in here with you.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for that warm introduction too. And thank you for putting on this great event as well. I think when it comes to being a female entrepreneur, which I consider myself to be, I always say that speaking has been one of the hardest things I've ever done, because being an entrepreneur is nonlinear. Going through medical school and residency was actually pretty easy in the sense the workload was hard, don't get me wrong. Did not like the 24-hour shifts. I could without that too, but they told you what to do. You do this course, you do this rotation, you write this exam, fast forward 10 years, here's your MD, done. There's nothing about being an entrepreneur that is linear. And I think all of us every day sort of have that feeling of, what exactly am I doing again? Or what am I supposed to be doing? And I think that feeling of constant imposter syndrome, realizing, do we have a message to share? And let's be honest, am I good enough to share it? And is this what I want to do? And part of it too is taking a chance on yourself, right? Taking a chance that the message you have is worth sharing. So for everybody listening today, the only thing that ever is going to fit you as well, we know that feeling when you put on that pair of jeans, you know what I'm talking about, that jeans that fit you really well. Oh, yeah. The only thing that ever fits you that well is your story. That's the thing that fits you so well. I've had 3 kids. I feel like I'm always in the postpartum period, and sometimes none of those jeans fit quite well too. But at the end of the day, it's owning your story, because ownership is owning your ship. Owning your vehicle, the vehicle that you chose to come here in. And we don't always get, I work with at-risk youth. I work with youth who have been dealt the hardest of cards. They didn't get to choose our parents. We don't get to choose our parents, where we were born, our circumstances, and our genetics. But at the end of the day, you can choose your potential as well. And if I can see these kids who are 15, 16, 17 being raised by no one but themselves and still have a message to share, then I feel like we have it within us to share that too. And for me, unlike the kids that I work with, like in the intro, I'm a physician. I work with a lot of at-risk youth. I came from a very privileged background. I had the very typical family, mom, dad, sibling, a financially stable household. But at the age of 4 or 5, I knew something wasn't right. I started having these thoughts that I didn't want to have. They were very distressing. They caused me a lot of anxiety. And this is 30 years ago. We didn't have the right lexicon or terminology for it. So I would talk to my mom about it, and she would do like any parent would. The thing I would do for my sons right now, tell them it's okay, you're normal, I've got your back, and do the things that all parents do. It wasn't until medical school that a slide flashed before me, and I saw, here are the different types of anxiety. And then there was a subtype, OCD. And then underneath that was what was called pure obsessional OCD. So a type of OCD that you don't have the compulsions, you don't have the checking, you don't have the cleaning, you don't have the washing. Nobody can observe it. You just have the absolutely terrifying, distressing, fall on your knees thoughts. And as a 4-year-old, I didn't know what it was. And as a 20-year-old, finally I had the words, but I still didn't know what it was. So I did like any good medical student was, and I suppressed it. I pretended like it didn't happen. And fast forward to the postpartum period, everything came raging to the surface in a condition now known as postpartum OCD. And in postpartum OCD, the distressing thought, the number one distressing thought, and we have to use the words because the words are important, is that could you do harm to your infant? And nobody is ever going to talk about things like that too. Yeah. I recently spoke at Yale University when I pitched them this idea that we need to talk more about postpartum OCD. And now we're finding that almost 50% of women in the first 3 months have these thoughts, but nobody's talking about it.
Well, yeah, it'd be difficult to speak it, even to think it. Like, how can I think this? It's not natural, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, absolutely.
And all that does, it leads to shame. It leads to stigma. It leads to that feeling that you're isolated, you're alone, and you're not as good. You're not as good at all.
You don't have to go on mute. That's one of those babies.
That is one of those babies. That's one of those babies that's kind of fallen, taken a tumble a little bit. And this is it. This is what it feels like to be, a female working mom trying to juggle it all, and your kid's crying in the background, and you have to make the best of it too. But he's got some good caregivers there who hopefully will attend to him quite well too. So, but sometimes it's just about being mom. Sometimes it's just about being mom too. But at the end of the day, when it came to my story, it was about realizing that I had to own my story. I didn't like my story. I felt ashamed of my story. And many viewers in your position might feel the same way, that they feel really, really, really embarrassed. But I think what I'm here to say is that you have to see the message that by sharing your story, you're able to help one more person. And that's what led to my keynote speaking. So when I was on that TEDx stage, I realized that talking about emotional literacy was the piece that I was missing. I could prescribe sertraline and Zoloft and Cipralex in about 5 seconds. That wasn't the hard part. The hard part was asking my youth, what brought you here? Tell me your story. Tell me why, and tell me why now. Why now did you decide to get help too? So all of that led to an awakening for me that I really had to start to understand this, and what I call train your brain. And to train your brain, you need to understand that emotions are energy in motion. They just come and they go. The problem is that emotions have a beginning, middle, and end, and most of us are so scared or fearful or uncomfortable with our emotions that in the middle part of the emotion, we do what everybody does. We suppress it.
Yeah.
We deny it or we blame. It's your fault. You're the reason I'm having that emotion. And we all know the blamers in our life. Their didn't go well. It's your fault, right? You are one of those 3 things, or you are all of those 3 things. But until you know what you are, it's really hard to move forward. I just had a really stressful meeting with a business partner on Friday. And I think especially as women, we're socialized, especially Canadian women, to say, I'm sorry, to say, it's okay, to say, I'll take it. And it was really difficult for me at that meeting to articulate that it's okay not to please everybody. It's okay not to please everybody. It's huge. And if you think about the core of that statement, the core of that statement is fear. Fear of being a failure.
Yeah.
Fear of letting someone down. So what I felt on that meeting wasn't anger. It was embarrassment and disappointment. So that's where it comes to the other key concept of emotional literacy is you got to name it correctly. Not everything is anger. Not everything is sadness. Treating your anger and treating your embarrassment or disappointment channels different things within you because it brings up different emotions within you. So they call it name it to tame it. And when you can name it correctly, you reduce the intensity of that emotion by 1/3, which is huge.
Oh, wow.
But you have to name it correctly too. And
I
so
feel like that's going a level deeper, right? It's easy to say I'm angry, but looking at like what's underneath that, is it really, and like you said, a lot of times it's fear or something else that's going on for us that really is more about us than it is necessarily that outside maybe agitator or person that's triggered you. But what is the trigger and what is the real, the root cause, the root emotion?
And the reason I think we talk about self-awareness and self-love and self-compassion so much, but the thing that we forget is that in order to do any of those things, you have to have an iota, just a little bit of self-acknowledgement, feeling that you know how far you've come. And this is for your entrepreneurs to listen to. Every day, it might feel like you've taken just a millistep in the right direction and then 3 steps in the wrong direction. But at the same time, you got to look back and say, well, where was I a year ago? Where was I 5 years ago? Where was I 10 years ago? And the key point is every event that happens, is it uncomfortable or is it unmanageable? Have you been through harder things before? And the resounding answer, if you let yourself, will be yeah. But we forget. We
do. And I think one thing I noticed in myself too is that when it's really hard, you don't usually have a choice of whether or not to stick in. But when it's just a little uncomfortable, we'll push it aside, we'll avoid it. And so we never really just are in it and have to go through it. Like sometimes when there's not a choice, it's a lot easier than when you could maybe just skate through or deal with it, next week or after the meeting or whatever, instead of just looking at it. Absolutely.
Of course. And that comes down to the suppression point of view. And you got to realize that your emotional literacy is as much learned as it is unlearned. You need to unlearn the things that you've done to survive and cope in your 30, 40, 50, 60 plus years. It's not about learning new skills. It's about unlearning the things you've already learned and realizing that those are coping mechanisms and patterns. And we all have our own triggers. Your partner looks at you the wrong way and suddenly your brain didn't go to an emotion. It went to a story. We think in stories. That's how we think to ourselves too. So everything, are you the victim? Are you the hero? How are you actually making sense of that? That is one of the key things too. So I think at the end of the day too, if your viewers can understand that there's 4 basic emotions, there's either fear, sadness, feeling angry, or happiness. Most emotions will distill down to one of those things. That's the truth of the matter. And I really have to argue that most of us, when it comes to our uncomfortable emotions, ends up distilling down to fear. Like, let's be honest right now, my child screaming in the background, there's right now a trigger, that fear of not being a good mom, fear of not being there for my child, right? Because we carry this duality of personalities where we're expected to perform and we're also expected to nurture and be a caregiver and be a thought leader and be an entrepreneur, right? There's so many different aspects to ourselves. So forgiving yourselves that you might not score 50% on each one of those every day, but do your sum total at the end of a week, right? It's not every day. It's at the end of the week that you look and they use the same analogy for toddlers eating their fruits and vegetables. My toddler survives on a grape for 3 days, but you average it out for the end of the week. So we owe the same grace to ourselves as well.
I love that, giving ourselves grace. I was thinking that yesterday, actually, trying to pull all this stuff together and just thinking about all of the responsibilities that I have, and it sometimes feels like you're never doing any of them well,
Yeah.
and so it's like, but it just gets to be, everything's okay. And my mantra now is it gets to be easy. Like, it doesn't have to be hard. It gets to be easy. And so just sitting in that, giving myself grace so that I can, actually look at and deal with the things I need to, rather than have an emotional response or a breakdown, just give up, Yeah. So
100%.
powerful.
I think it's really easy for people to say that whatever entrepreneurial journey you're in, you're either totally in or totally out. And that sounds wonderful on paper. But sometimes as a woman, as a mother, it is really difficult to take those risks financially, economically, in a society's point of view for your kids. So what I say is that instead of saying one day I want to be a speaker, tell yourself I am. I
Mhm.
am this. What, maybe it's a speaker, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a business leader. You are that. And by sending that right email, starting your YouTube channel, posting one thing on Facebook, whatever the case might be, you are not going to, you are. You are,
Yes.
right? So that's how you start. You start by doing the little nebulous things that somehow create that beautiful rainbow at the end of the day. But every day, all you see is a little pixel. You don't get to see the full picture,
Yeah.
right? That's
It's
okay.
just being developed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you feel like the toll of not having this emotional literacy, not really looking at yourself? What do you see in your children, or in, I'm sure it presents in most people similarly, thinking of business women, like, what's the impact of not spending the time to really know yourself and work through, that identification, that naming, and then the processing of those emotions?
So in our society, we've called that burnout. And I think just like self-care, we overuse the term burnout because burnout is actually has a 3-pronged criteria for it. But one of the big things from burnout is that the things that you used to enjoy doing, you just don't enjoy doing those anymore. And you actually start to become a bit cynical as well. So when you start to see those types of shifts, that's when what I call emotional seepage. It's like squeezing out a sponge. Your sponge can only hold so much if you've got the store brand or the regular brand, whatever it happens to be, but it only can hold so much. And eventually it starts to seep out of your pores and it starts to show up in your workplace, show up in your family, show up in your relationships. And these are the people that come after me after a keynote going, oh my word, like this is what I needed to hear. And to be honest, these are the patients that I see, because usually at that point, we are seeing the repercussions of it. The insomnia, the panic attacks, the anhedonia, which means lack of enjoying the things that you used to enjoy. So suddenly, as a medical professional, I'm ticking off diagnostic criteria. So we've gone from emotional issue to suddenly a diagnosable mental health condition. And my argument is that this can be prevented if we work on that. That's what I believe. But this takes a lot of groundwork, and it actually starts in our childhood. But just like for me, you can start. I spent 12 years of postgraduate education in kinesiology and medicine. Not one person ever taught me about my emotions, ever. Like I could name every disease in the book, but that was never important, yet those are directly correlated too. So this is where we start to do the work from here. It's think better and feeling better. But you have to train your brain, because your brain only cares about predictability and familiarity and keeping you safe. It doesn't care at all about keeping you happy. That's not its job, right?
Yeah. So when you talk about working on your brain, what is that? Training your brain, what's that look like?
So training your brain is understanding one thing, and that's your emotions are not there as tripping hazards. They're there to teach you something, right? We often think they're just stumbling blocks, but in fact, they're trying to tell you something, trying to tell you a story. Every emotion that you have is usually linked to something that you perceive as significant. Like I have 3 sons. My middle son, something could happen and he's like, I don't care. I don't care. My eldest son is like, oh my gosh, the world is ending.
Yeah.
Same mother, same father, same upbringing, but one has a huge emotional reaction. One's like, whatever, not a big deal. That's how we are in our society, but it's your job to look deeper. Why did that meeting on Friday that I had with a business colleague bother me so much? I could say, I could eat my feelings. I could, drink my feelings, but then it becomes to go, okay, what does that say about me? And what that said about me was that I try too hard to please people. And I felt like I was letting somebody down. And the key point is that every emotion comes with a story in your head. The problem is that we sell ourselves on the story. You've already sold yourself that you are the best blank and you are the worst blank, and it's black and white and there's no shades of gray.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. I love to give this example. When I was growing up, we would have hot soup and then put saran wrap over the soup. Why we did this, I have no idea. Then we would take two to vent the soup. That's what you have to do to your story. Poke holes in your story and go, is it true? Is it always true that I'm not supported? You know, my biggest story in my head is that I'm the working mom. I don't have enough support at home. Like, I love that story. It makes me very comfortable. Does it serve me? Absolutely not. Is it familiar? Absolutely. You have to ask yourselves, can you poke a couple of holes in your story? Is it always serving you? Part of it is, but a big part probably isn't. And that speaks to the confidence layer. What story is holding you back from your full confidence? What fear? It's not all fears, it's what specific fear, because your fears are like bowling pins. Your job is to knock them down. But you can't knock them down unless you know what they are.
Yeah. Putting a face on them. I actually remember a birthday party my son went to at the bowling alley, and he brought home a bowling pin. Like, even getting that little kid set of bowling pins, you know, and actually identifying it. I mean, whatever it takes.
Absolutely.
To just have some fun and figure it out.
There's something tangible to it. And I always say, like, every day is Halloween for our fears. It's this, my fear of failure just shows up in different costumes every day. It's just a Halloween. It's just a different costume, but the core is fear. So instead of tackling the different costumes, tackle the root. But you can only tackle the root if you allow yourself to. And you can only allow yourself to is if you've acknowledged yourself enough to be somewhat compassionate to yourself.
I love that. Very powerful. We could probably stay here, and you could actually do some training in my brain. This is a space that I've been working at for a couple of years, finally recognizing one, my kids were moving out of the house. So I finally had time to think about me. And when you're by yourself and in your head, like, what's holding me back? But I would say I absolutely agree with being able to name it and look at it and then ask, like, that fear, is it rational? Most of them aren't rational, but we still hold on to them. I did learn that, trying to rationalize fear away also did not work. It really was just about feeling it and being in it, and then making a decision to do something, try something different, and then create new experiences that, maybe it's a hypothesis. Okay, I believe that this thing's going to happen, but let me find evidence to say one way or another, does it? If I tell somebody the truth that I'm going to, and that I know it's going to disappoint them, will they abandon me, or what will happen? Right? Maybe they'll surprise me and stand at the table and say, you know what, Dr. Shahana, you're absolutely right. I'm not pulling my weight, or whatever the case may be. So I think part of that has been, just getting curious and looking in, naming it, working in it, but also challenge yourself. What if you're wrong? What would it look like for you to be wrong about that fear and do something different? Yeah.
And all of that.
I know you have a webinar. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and then all that doesn't diminish your self-worth, right? You get to determine that. I think so much of us are so scared of being introspective. I talk to my youth, and I'll often ask them, like, do you love yourself? And they'll use many expletives, and they'll say no. And I'm like, at the age of, on the age of 15, 16, 17, you already feel so strongly that you hate yourself. Like, and it's just, it's heartbreaking and terrifying at the same time. But I think we as adults have semblances of that. And it's not our narrative. It's a narrative of our moms, our dads, our coaches, our parents, those types of things. So realizing that your emotions have nothing to do with your self-worth, right? And that's a big lesson for us.
Absolutely. I love that. I know you have a webinar where you kind of bring people into this space and this way of thinking. Tell me a little bit about what that is and how might people connect with you and the work that you're doing. Love to learn more.
Absolutely. So I've designed this thing called the optimal health pyramid, which is what I scratched on the back of a napkin when I found myself at my rock bottom because I just couldn't figure out how I got there. And basically, this is the pyramid that I live by, which the foundation is connecting deeply with others. So your relationships and thinking better. You know, the middle part of the pyramid is what every book and podcast is about, which is fine, which is eating better, moving more, sleeping well. Great.
Mhm.
But I focused so much on that I kind of forgot this part. And I tried to fish oil and yoga my way to fitness. And that only works for a part. And the
Yes.
top of the pyramid is not finding your purpose, it's living with purpose. It's your purpose is not some black box that has to be discovered, right? It's every day. It's
Right.
living with versus
Mhm.
for a specific purpose. So there's a free quiz online that's a bit fun to take where you can answer some questions and, you know, get some feedback as to where you rate in that pyramid. And then also, which is going to get put on my website soon, but it's just freeclass.Dr. Shahana is a free webinar on exactly this, which is emotional literacy.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And you guys, I encourage you to re-listen to the words are golden. Go out and sign up for this webinar and really spend some time in that introspection, loving yourself. You know, when I put this event together, I really wanted to talk about limiting beliefs and then tactical business strategies and where do I need to be. But this was the piece that I know is really, it's not even a third, it's kind of the baseline, right? Is that self-love, that self-acceptance, but also those relationships that we have around us. And obviously those relationships, whether they're personal or their business, are going to be impacted by our own emotional literacy and how we approach those situations. So thank you for bringing that into the space with us and just helping us learn a little bit more in this area. All right, so our task from this, go out, sign up for the webinar, take the quiz, and then begin to do some work. Now, do you do coaching or is it strictly through your medical practice? What's the extension of, you know, what's the next step?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So after the webinar, people do have the opportunity to buy some of the video courses that I've designed. Coaching can be a little bit tricky, especially in Canada as a medical practitioner. It's hard to know where you wear the hat between coach and doctor, and those lines can get blurry. So I've decided to put the stuff onto video courses. And honestly, it was just for me to have a vehicle to record this stuff. And it goes back to all the entrepreneurs out there. I had no idea what I was doing. So I just started somewhere. And all of us, there's no script to any of this. So the fact that you're even listening, you're a step ahead.
100%. Thank you so much. And I did not have a chance to watch the TEDx talk. I wonder if you'll share that link, and you guys, I'll put it in the show notes too. I would encourage you guys to go out. I love just listening to TEDx. There's always so much just goodness that you can get. And I'm interested to see what you shared. So thank you for being here, Dr. Shahana. I am so glad that we connected. We will get you the links and everything, and our audience definitely reach out and connect. Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.